Okay, so I've been using this Dyson V7 Motorhead vacuum for a couple weeks now, and I wanted to do something approaching a full review. This is something you buy, costs a lot of money, and you use for a few years, so it's hard to review it in total, so I'll try to leave some notes under the review. First of all, I'm a long-time Dyson vacuum user, and I finally went ahead and picked up this V7 Motorhead because it was just time. My older models, mainly the DC59 Motorhead, were about shot, and I wanted something with a similar feature set. I really wanted a HEPA filter, but at current time, right now, the V7 is not available in a HEPA. I could have gone to a V8, but then you're moving to something much more expensive. This V7 Motorhead sells at retail, and we're talking, Target, Bed Bath & Beyond, Amazon, all those other things, for $300, which is what I paid for it, which seems like a pretty reasonable deal. It has some changes from the previous models, like the DC59 and more specifically the V6. The first is that the fan speed, so the motor speed, is lower. So we can listen to this here. And on max, if you listen really closely, you may want to rewind and do it again. At max, there's like a sort of a high pitch, and that comes from the motor inside spinning more quickly. The faster that turbine spins, the more suction you get, but also that sort of like louder, more piercing tone. And here without the wind shear. The fan speed, I keep saying that, the motor speed on the V7 is actually lower than that on the V6, which means there's a slight decrease in suction power when you are using it in standard mode. So that's just the normal mode, but it's a lower sound level and a less piercing sound. Listen to it. It's really not that bad. So basically the V7 loses some suction power at the standard level, but the trade-off for that is it's more pleasant to hear and a longer battery life. V7 is rated at a 30-minute battery life, where the V6 only had a 20-minute battery life. Same with the V8. Then if you go ahead and want that suction power, you move it to max. Now the V7 has the full suction power of the V6 before it. It's the same fan speed, but also just as loud. So it's worth keeping that in mind. Other big change to the V7 is the hygienic bin. So basically when you pull this up, it empties just like that. Before, this component right here didn't pull up out of the bin, just the bottom dropped. And when the bottom dropped, the debris would get stuck in this tight area here. You can see there's just maybe an inch of clearance, maybe 3/4 of an inch of clearance right here. So all your dust and cat hair or whatever would get stuck, and you'd have to dig around in there either with your hand or like with a chopstick or something. Is what I usually ended up doing. So it has this new, it's called the hygienic bin design. It makes the whole mechanism more complex, but and actually I think more fragile, but I haven't had any problems with it. In fact, it works quite well. With this model, the max button is here. So it's instead of being a button on the back, it's a switch, which is really nice because it's really clear. Before, you had to press the max button while the vacuum was active, which is really unclear. That's not how most buttons work. Usually you could press it and it stays activated, whether the device is on or off. With the Dyson, it only stayed activated. Like basically the vacuum had to be running and you press the button. It was just very confusing. Here it's a switch. Normal mode, max mode. That's all there is. And you could switch it while the vacuum is active if you want. As far as the accessories go, this is a pretty standard kit. If you want the full accessory kit, you have to get the Absolute, but I really wouldn't recommend that. It's just a lot of extra money. And it really only makes sense if you need those pieces. The standard head is pretty much unchanged. The one thing people notice is that the buttons are now red, that anytime a button or something is red in a well-designed piece of consumer electronics, or whatever you want to call it, home goods, it'll that means it's an active part. It's red, I could push it. This is gray, probably can't push it. This active part has been moved onto the head. So if it ever does wear out, your really expensive vacuum doesn't wear out, just this sort of expensive head wears out. It has a really good fit. They definitely improved that connection, and that fit is nicer. You know, I think these things, you could really only get to know them after a couple years, but definitely have had no problems with it. All these accessories have been not really redesigned. They're essentially the same as they've been since, like, I don't know, the DC44. So if you have crazily high expectations from that, I would say you could forget about that. These things have been tweaked, but not really redesigned at all. Some of the parts are not here. The only part I'm missing that comes with the Absolute is called the mini motorized head. So it's worth keeping that in mind, that you won't get that mini motorized head, which I really like. And I liked it on my V7, sorry, on my DC59, but it's probably not worth upgrading for. You get the little combination head, which is nice. Obviously, this piece for crevasse use or whatever. And then it's hard to film because I don't have a wide angle camera, but here's just the normal extension, and it comes in that standard magenta, which I think is nice enough. Some other changes with the V7 that I've noted in previous videos is that the battery is actually a little thicker, so you can't put this in the holder of some of your older vacuums. I tried to charge this in a DC59 holder, and that didn't work, which is disappointing, because now I have to like take the DC59 wall mount, remove it, and put it in the, like, put the new one up in the place of this. As for the colors, you know, it's pretty much the same Dyson colors. This is this purple pink type thing. Really not a big deal. One thing they did is they did really unify on all the active areas being red, which is really nice. Past that is really not too much else to say. Checking out my notes here, it has the better bin, same max suction speed, lower normal suction speed, longer battery life. The weight on the V7 is slightly more than that of the older models like the V6 and the DC59, but it's less than that of the V8. So that's worth keeping in mind. And we're only talking about a few ounces here. There's no HEPA model. I think that's a real bummer with the V7. By the time it got to V7, I was hoping everything would be HEPA. But if you poke around on Dyson's website, there is actually a V7 Animal hiding there. It's just not widely available yet. I think you have to get it through Costco. Past that, I think the V7 is a nice way to go. Basically, the V6 is being phased out. So you could buy one used and get a louder vacuum with less suction time. A louder vacuum with slightly more suction power but less battery life at normal mode. Or you can get the V7, which is what I would recommend. They're really similar. So if you want to get if you can get like a $200 V6 instead of a $300 V7, that might make sense. But with the V7 having obviously warranty support for a full period of time, you know, instead of if you're buying a used V6 or whatever, the improved bin and just like less sound during normal mode, I think that's the way to go. You lose a little bit of suction power, but not enough that it's going to ruin the experience. This is still totally sufficient. And like I really think suction power tends not to be a huge deal on day-to-day life. It's totally sufficient. What you lose out on with the V7 over like a V7 Absolute is you don't get the soft head, which usually if you're not picking something up, it's because of a physical barrier on the here and just it not being picked up, not you lacking the suction power to pick it up. Lacking the suction power will stop you from like picking up like a really fine dust, or if you're like have a lot of carpeting and you really want it to be as clean as possible, then you might want the suction power, but it's a different issue and kind of an edge case. You know, usually this thing will get it totally clean or like clean enough, but you know, you have to decide if it's enough suction power for you. So yeah, that is the Dyson V7. I definitely recommend it, but I recommend it if you're a Dyson fan, if you're a V6 fan. If you are looking at like $100 vacuum, I can't say that this thing is totally gonna justify it for you. So that's it, Dyson V7. Thanks for watching.